I don't know if you're aware, but the first time I've ever visited a training ground was Melwood, and I was
Yeah.
invited by the great Gerard Houllier and Phil Thompson. And you do the press conference, and they say, "Oh, come over," and they walk me into this sacred part of a training ground of a professional club, and I was going there for the first time, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God!" Walk into the canteen, and they give me some food, and I'm the happiest person in the world. And all of a sudden, Stevie G passes by, and because yourself were watching Sky Sports at the time and Spanish football, it was like, "Oh, hi, Guillem," as you were my best friend. Then you pass by as well, and he's like, "Oh, hey," and start talking to me about players, Spanish players, Spanish teams, and you made me feel so comfortable and so welcome, which is not always the case when you are on the other side. So I want to thank you for that first introduction into the professional football.
Well, you to us were that famous guy from Revista de la Liga. So we have to speak to you.
What people see on the screen is what we see off the screen, is that passion that you've got for the game, but more for the game, see if I get it this right, for what you do, for whatever you decided to do. Isn't it right?
Yes, of course. I mean, I take the way I played as a player was very enthusiastic, and I take that into punditry now. And I'm sure if I had gone into coaching or managing, I would have been seen as an enthusiastic, maybe emotional type of coach, maybe on the sidelines. Because I think with football, it just gets me going, gets me juices flowing. It has done since I can ever remember at the age of 4 or 5, and I don't think it will ever lose me. I always find something to analyze, look at, debate, disagree, agree with football. It very rarely, if ever, feels boring, or there's nothing to talk about, or there's nothing new, or a new manager, or a new team, a new system, or something that, as I said, I can be interested in.
For the first book I wrote, A Season on the Brink, it was, of course, about that first season of Rafa Benitez at Liverpool. I was given the opportunity to write it, or I was asked to write it, about 4 hours after you won it. It was like, right, now we've got a reason to write a book, and you have to do it, and you've got 2 months because it has to come out in October, whatever. And again, everybody went on holidays, you went on holidays, but you picked the phone up and discussed things with me. One thing I didn't put into the book was the fascinating situation when I was invited by Xabi Alonso's family to join them in the hotel afterwards. And nobody could come into the hotel apart from Jamie Carragher's cousins, of which you've got about 80. So people knock the door, and it's like, "I'm Jamie Carragher's cousin." Then, come in. How many cousins did you bring to the party that day?
Everyone was my cousin there, wasn't it? What a night that was. I mean, that was just something that everyone wanted to be part of, and it's, a big thing. You can imagine Liverpool supporters, where's the team, where's the hotel? And I spent half my night, instead of celebrating the Champions League, was getting people in the hotel. Really, so it was a brilliant night, that really. And to be honest, that's just Liverpool people. They want to be where the party is, and the main party, shall we say. And they were everywhere. They were like ants.
Yet again, it's the kind of thing that you don't get seen written anywhere when you talk about Liverpool. The 2 things we describe, me coming into the canteen and you welcoming me, and of course, you wanted Liverpool people, fans, to actually share your happiness. It is what I feel Liverpool is made of. I lived in Liverpool for 12 years, and that's what I always felt. So again, thanks for embracing me as part of all that. When you were on the other side, when you were a player, of course, the relationship with the media, how close did you get to them, of what you can say, of course? How important was it to have a relationship going somehow?
I think it is important in some ways, and the reason being is you play for a big club like Liverpool, you have to speak to the press. I mean, it's a huge club. And I used to enjoy speaking to the press, and being totally honest, I used to enjoy doing interviews because I love talking about football. And I think most people found that it was a good interview. Basically, I'd always say something. I wouldn't speak in cliche. So I actually enjoyed doing them. I think you're always closest to, the local press really, who are a big supporter of the club and the players, really. I mean, if the local press ever go against the manager or the club, you know, it's dark days, or it's almost possibly the end for a manager, really. So, you know, local lads who, the same as you, the big probably supporters, they haven't had a talent for football, they got a talent for writing. So, yeah, so I was quite pally with, you know, Chris Bascom, Tony Barrett, Dom King. They were all lads who were the Liverpool correspondent for the local paper. Not so much with national, really, as such, because you didn't have as close a relationship with them, but you know them and you do the odd interview and different things like that. And hence possibly why you were close to maybe the Spanish lads, because you've got, you know, the Spanish thing, the situation, you moved to Liverpool. So, you know, you build that bond. And I think it works for everyone. If let's be honest about it, the press need players, not so much for information, but it's just sometimes nice to get an interview or speak on things. And also players sometimes need someone batting for them. Really, at times, maybe when times are tough, or maybe something the wrong end of the stick has come out about a game or something off the pitch, wherever it may be. I think we all know the rules of it, that we're all sort of, we can help each other.
Yeah, for us it was a bunch of immigrants helping each other. That's how I felt. And it was the first Spanish guys or the Spanish coaching staff that were really settling in England, and they needed to know how it all worked, and at the same time sometimes helped to understand how you know why of the reactions. But by the way, you should do a book. You've done a book now based on games, and we'll get into that in a minute. But you could have done a book on the interviews you've done. Was it that the Telegraph? And
yeah, the Telegraph. Yeah, we've done some big interviews. Obviously, a podcast similar to yours. We do interviews on that. So I do like doing interviews, because sometimes I worry that people may get sick of hearing my opinion or my view on something all the time. So sometimes I think it's nice to hear someone else's view on a situation, and see if I can get more answers out of them than maybe they would with someone else, and maybe helps my skills going forward. When I might have to start asking questions more, maybe if there's a new role in the future, who knows?
In the podcast, in the interviews you did for the paper, what was the one that really stand out and you learn a lot, or you heard things you didn't expect?
I think whenever you get Klopp, you know, you've got a good interview. You don't need to wait for the interview. It's almost getting Jurgen Klopp is gold dust. So no matter what that's for. So I think of an interview for the paper before the Champions League final. He just has a way with words, and he'll come out with something that you've never heard before. And he said something about Liverpool, you know, when he first came in, basically how poor they were. So, you know, I'm trying to think of the line now. He basically said his Liverpool team would become a supermodel, really, where everyone wanted to go out, where everyone wanted to see it, everyone wanted to speak to it. It wasn't the case when he first came in. I'm not quite sure what the word he used to describe what Liverpool were and what the Gale was when he first came in. But we've had him, spoke to him there. Also on Monday Night Football, we still speak about Jurgen Klopp coming on that show there, and helping us and giving us more than what maybe other people who've come on, because they're a little bit guarded because they're a manager. So he's almost gold dust when you get in. But in terms of playing wise, I'd say Xavi Hernandez. I've spoken to him for the newspaper. I've spoken to him for the book as well. And I think that it's fair to say we've got similar passions on the game, really. And it's obvious to me he's going to be a future Barcelona manager.
Yeah, in the Monday Night Football show, two managers that you tried to get right from the start when they first arrived was Pep Guardiola and Pochettino, and eventually you managed to convince them, as you always do. What was your impression of both of them?
Well, I think with Poch, it was great to get him on because no one had seen him for such a long time. I think Pochettino is one of those guys who everyone loves. I think even maybe secretly Arsenal supporters, you can't not like him. He comes across as such a nice guy, and everyone loves watching his teams, really. It was great coming on because it's like a double act with him and Jesus. So obviously you don't see him on camera, but when the game was on and we were watching the game together, it was great just listening to them, talking to them about players and where they want to go in the future. There was no mention, I must say, of Paris Saint-Germain at that time. A lot of talk was of Manchester United, really. But they've already got off to a good start. I think they've got the first trophy. But to get these people on, it's not just for the viewer I don't feel. I think it's for me as well, and Dave Jones or Gary Neville if he's there, for us to learn as well. I mean, we give opinions on that show, but nobody knows everything about football, and we've never managed I've never managed. Gary's certainly not at the level of Pochettino or Pep or Klopp when he came on. Roberto Martinez as well was fantastic when he came on. There's so much to learn that you can then use in the future in your own analysis and then go back to it as well. So that's one of the reasons why I like these great football brains coming on. It's great for the show, but to also learn myself really, and their thought process really. So it's brilliant, and when you've got someone who's stardust, and you almost just want them to run the show because there's that much information coming out of the quality stuff like that.
Pep Guardiola was exactly that, wasn't he? He just let him deal with it, prepare a few things beforehand, and that's it. You just need to sit down and listen to him, I imagine.
Yes, and that's the thing with managers that we've got come on. We possibly learn because you're that excited when they come on. You learn not to have too much stuff because they love the game that much and they go into that much detail. They could spend 5 or 6 minutes on one clip. So you have all these ideas about, we'll look at this playing from the back, the front three, the 4-3-3, De Bruyne's position. So you're almost in the 3-hour show, really, because these football people are so detailed. They take so long over a piece of information or a clip or a video clip on that, and that's what you want. But you're just so desperate to get so much more out of them. You always come away thinking, oh, I want them to come on again. We need to get them on again to speak about this and that. And that's just a great thing. And I think that's what the show is. The show is detail. That's the best way to describe it. And I think football detail, with people who are really interested in tactics and setup and formations, they can spend so long on such a detail, and that shows why they are top managers.
I imagine the producers in the year saying after 3 minutes, move on, we've got another one. And then you have to battle that.
We've got to get to the break. We've got to get to the break.
No, stay here because this is special. Actually creates, on the studio, there is a magic that gets created that doesn't always get replicated or seen or felt in the gallery. And when it is there, you have to fight it, don't you, to keep going. But
well, I'll just give you an example that no one picked up on at the time. But when we had Jurgen Klopp, it was that good that the first hour of the show, we had to obviously go to the game. We couldn't stop the game, but we didn't actually put the managers' interviews in before the game. So rather than listen to both managers, that would normally be a 2 or 3 minute interview. They obviously did the interview, but we didn't put it in the show because we'd rather have 6 minutes of Klopp. I can't tell you who the managers were at the time. I can't think off the top of my head, but the producer made a big decision that's possibly never been done before. But I think it was the right one, was that we'd rather have an extra 5 or 6 minutes of Jurgen Klopp than the two managers. So God knows what Twitter was like with the clubs who were involved, because they're quite quick to tell you if you haven't done enough on them before Monday night. But Klopp was, as I said, was gold dust, and we had to keep him on.
Yes, and when it gets interesting as well is when the cameras stop rolling and you sit down and then you discuss things. Did you find that they all relaxed and there was a different kind of even tone in their voices, and you learned things there off the record that you didn't expect?
Yes, because, I mean, as you know, before you mentioned Rafa Benitez, and Rafa Benitez used to have a great saying that football is a lie. And what he basically means is we all say a certain thing on camera, but off camera, we all say something completely different. And I think that is the case a lot of times, especially with managers, not so much with me and you. Our job is to give our honest opinions, and we're paid for that. But obviously when managers and coaches or players, or current players, I should say, come on TV shows, they have to be really careful what they say. They can't allow anything to be blown up out of proportion. It's, can I give enough without crossing that line? And if I don't give anything, everyone will say the show was boring, he didn't have much personality. So it's always a difficult balancing act when you get someone on. And we know that, we appreciate that. So we always say we would never put anyone in a really tough position and ask something that was put them really on the spotlight. When Pochettino came on, it was massive talk about Manchester United. We asked one question on it only because we'd get criticised if we didn't ask it. But it's almost a case of, we don't really care how you answer it, just so we can say we've asked you. We're not really bothered about Man United. That's not what the show is. It's more about tactics and things like that. And Pochettino was really worried coming on, really. So I had to speak to him a day before and assure him that it would be football, and it wouldn't be about sensational stuff really. So I think that helps us get people on, because I think people realise we're trying to not get big headlines out of them that would cause problems in the future, but just have a football chat.
You changed the trend in many things, but one of them is that I remember when we were doing the previews of games, it would be first half an hour, then at the end it was like 5 minutes, and that's it, because nobody watches the game. Sorry, nobody watches the show before the game starts. That's changed. We're all watching Monday Night Football for sure. Also on a Monday, one of the biggest, best shows is on a Monday. That is also a change of trend. But one of the things that I picked on the book is the facility that I knew anyway of you understanding what happens in the games. But once you pick the games, and the games are from Liverpool 4-0 to Barcelona, Arsenal beat Liverpool 2-0, the 5-1 of England against Germany, up till the Barcelona 3, Manchester United 1, or the Istanbul night. What was the one game that you had to change your analysis or change your mind about where you had thought of the game by looking back at it?
Yes, I think the big one was maybe Manchester United beating Bayern Munich in the Nou Camp in '99, because that, forever anyone will tell you that Manchester United were the luckiest team alive, and of course they had huge luck if you score 2 goals in the last minute of a game, but they performed a lot better than what they ever given credit for, really. And Bayern Munich only had themselves to blame, because they shut up shop very early on after going 1-0 up, and Manchester United were the better side without being at their ultimate best, really. So I had no really sympathy watching it back because of how Bayern Munich set up, really. And Bayern Munich almost set up like they were away from home, and they took an early leg in the first leg of a semi-final, and they were waiting to go back for the second leg, as most teams will. But this was a final. It was a one-off game, really. And I think with the problems Manchester United had, the players that were out, I thought David Beckham's performance was sensational, really, and something that's never really spoken about. I think we always talk about, Solskjaer, especially getting that goal. And as you can imagine, it's a game I've never revisited ever before. And I think I watched it I know where I watched it. I watched it in Las Vegas in a casino. I was on holiday at that time, and I was absolutely distraught when those 2 goals went in the last minute. So I'd never watched it again. And I watched it again, really went through it again. And Alex Ferguson always said after the game he felt Manchester United did deserve it. And I think he was laughed at and thought maybe he was biased. But having watched it again and really looked at it, I have to agree.
So you've gone back 3 or 4 decades in football, and if you had to pick, I don't know if you had this thinking already, but if you had to pick 1 or 2 things that have changed through football, the biggest things, what would those be?
I think the standard and the quality of the football technically, and I know players from maybe the 80s get a little bit upset by that when they hear us talk about the game now, and we talk about overlapping fullbacks, centre backs getting on the ball, playing between the lines, these type of sayings that we use. But I think it sometimes upsets players from the 80s that we say they were not capable of it, but maybe they were. But maybe they weren't capable of it because of the pitches or the way the game was played, the aggression in the game that stopped free-flowing football, really. So when you watch the difference to a game of football now to when I was watching Everton Bayern Munich that we analysed in 1985, I mean, it almost looks like a completely different game. And that's not being disrespectful to those players. I think, as I said, sometimes they get frustrated with that. But, I mean, I watch games from when I played. When I watch football now, Liverpool play now, it's a completely different game technically, and how long these teams keep the ball for. We have this idea of how good teams were in the past. Now, they were great teams. I always think, any team that's great in a specific area could have adapted to any area. I always believe that, because I think the football is better now because players are looked after better, pitches are better, advances with foreign coaches coming into the game as well. But I do always believe football gets better. I'm not one of them who says, in my day, it was better for this. I always think football's getting better, moving forward, getting faster, improving, really. But I do always believe great players could have adapted to different eras as well, really. But I just think the actual game and how different systems are played a lot more now. When I was growing up in the 80s, it was 4-4-2, certainly in England. Every team played the same, and whoever had the best team won, really. Now I think there's a lot more to it. I think the TV aspect of it, now watching games constantly, coaches having so much analysis on the opposition as well, really. So you've always got to try and come up with something different, a different plan, which I think it makes it a lot more interesting to us to actually analyse, if I'm being honest. I look at the 80s games now, I'm thinking, if you were doing a Monday night football show where everyone was playing the same system in the league, playing a similar style of football, it's certainly a lot easier, I would say, to analyse football now.
One of the things, I've just finished the biography of Maradona. One of the things that I picked on that is the empowering of referees, because the tackles were unbelievable. In '86, in the meeting against England, England just went hard but fair. But there were other games against Belgium, against Korea, against Brazil, also in '82, in which like they could have broke the man, and the referees couldn't do anything because a tackle from behind wasn't red at the time, and it was allowed that kind of football. That of course has benefited football, hasn't it, and the artists.
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, you mentioned the World Cup. I think the famous one is Gentile, I think, and was that in '82, was it? Or was that '82?
In '82, and it was, I think it was 37 fouls or something. He only got a yellow after 45 minutes, and that's all he got, one yellow. So yeah.
I mean, it just, and I think in some ways that's why for a lot of people Maradona may be number one in a lot of people's eyes, because I think the game was obviously getting more physical and faster, and it obviously got to a point where it couldn't continue, and now we're almost going the other way. But I think Maradona was playing when it was at its height of cynicism, really. You think of maybe playing in Italy as well with two-man markers and a sweeper in behind, certainly in those early days. I know that changed maybe in the late 80s when, Milan came in and maybe teams started playing more of a back four and a zonal system. But, what he was up against in that day and age, I think that's why Maradona gets so much respect, really, for the player that he was. Not necessarily because his numbers are better than Messi or Ronaldo, but the fact that he played in an era where people thought, wow, you talk about courage and bravery of players, well, actually taking the ball, no one tackles from behind or coming. And also the fact that he was still taking the ball in those situations when his career was nearly finished a few years before, I think, by the butcher of Bilbao, Goycochea, when he was playing for Barcelona.
Which, by the way, Jamie, nobody calls him like that in Spain. This is a saying that I think it came out in the Sun first, and it's been repeated since. Poor guy. but let me agree to disagree on that one and see what you think of it. Maradona reached heights that I've never seen anybody, and all the football that I've seen back and in my lifetime, reach heights between 85 to 87, in which he wins the World Cup and wins the first Scudetto in '87 with Napoli. Heights that I've never seen anybody do, especially semi-finals against Belgium. It was unbelievable. Almost won the game on his own. But by then, already in '86, '87, he was addicted to cocaine already, and his body was already giving up. Still won a Scudetto with Napoli in '90. Those heights nobody reached. But to actually do it for 10, 15 years, like Cristiano, like Messi have done, you that have been a professional, you must be in awe of doing it so often and doing it in the big games. Are you surprised, first of all, that Maradona really peaked in such a small space of time, but we still remember him so fondly?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, that, because I always believe this. Most footballers have a career from the age of 20 to 35, but people will only remember 4, 5 moments or things that really happen. It may be a bit different for Messi or Ronaldo, really, but I even think of a player in England like Paul Gascoigne. He's loved, not because he played well every week and won lots, because he's got those 4 or 5 moments that were huge, like the World Cup in 1990, Euro 96, the goal against Arsenal in a big semi-final. He has those 4 or 5 moments everyone can remember, and it united the country. So he's an absolute god in England, Paul Gascoigne. Will we ever get another Gascoigne? But then I look at players like Gerrard, Beckham, Scholes, who did it every week for 10 or 15 years and won lots more trophies, won European trophies. But England and a tournament is the pinnacle. And I think that's what the situation with Maradona. And I used to think this with South American players when I was a kid, even Brazil players, and it was different because we didn't watch them week in, week out, but they'd almost get themselves ready for tournaments. And I'd watch like Dunga, who was a Brazil captain, playing in like semi-finals and finals, but you wouldn't really know who he played for. You know, I think he played for Fiorentina, didn't he, or smaller teams, or maybe he was back in Brazil. And you'd be like, these players just come together in these tournaments, really, and get themselves ready. And that's why they're unique and remembered so often. But the thing with Maradona is because 86 was my memory. I didn't watch Napoli every week. I know they won the league twice, and it was amazing. It never been done before or after. But because you never saw them so often, there was a mystique to them. Whereas now, when we watch Messi and Ronaldo, we're almost too critical of them when they go a couple of games not playing well, because we watch them that much. It doesn't seem special when you watch them as much now. And I think that was the difference maybe with Pele in the past, when people are watching Brazil in Mexico in 1970, and Pele's having a shot from the halfway line. He's dummying the goalkeeper. He's going round him. I just think there was more of a mystique to tournaments then. And I think that was a good thing, I should say. I love watching Messi and Ronaldo every week, but I do think we've lost that mystique of tournaments that we had in the past, which I think maybe elevated Maradona and maybe a Pele even higher in people's eyes than a Messi and Ronaldo, who actually do it week in, week out for like 15, 20 years.
In fact, you describe wonderfully why we'll never agree who was the greatest player ever, because it is such a subjective thing that perhaps even have to do in some cases with 7 games played in a summer tournament. But having said that, Messi or Ronaldo for you?
Messi. I've never changed that. I think I'm with the majority on that. I think I have possibly more respect for Ronaldo, and the reason I say that is because he has got unbelievable talent, but his mentality, his focus, his work rate has made him what he is, or got him to where he is, has taken him to another level, where whenever you think he's finished or Messi's done something amazing, he comes back with something again and again and again. And it must have been tough for him at times, even when he was at late stages at United, early days at Madrid, where it was still Messi was all, everyone, no matter what he did, people would say Messi, Messi, Messi. I think now it's a bit more even, really. But I think of all those Ballon d'Ors, Messi was winning, even when Ronaldo was playing out of his skin. But he still came back for more, and that's what I respect so much. But what I would say is, I think Ronaldo does things that other players can do, but he does them more often. You know, he scores more goals, but I think Messi does things that other players can't do. So when another player watches, so you see Ronaldo score a great goal, and you think, well, okay, I've seen that before. But Ronaldo does it so often. But Messi, the way he dribbles and runs with the ball, you very rarely see that in football now. I mean, most teams don't even have a dribbler in the team anymore now. You don't see anyone run with the ball. So he does things that professional footballers are open-mouthed with. That's the best way to describe it. It's not just supporters, it's like top players are thinking, I can't believe that. I can't believe he's done that. And that spell with Pep going into Luis Enrique's team, that era of like 7, 8 years when Barcelona was just off the scale what Messi was doing. And that's why I'd always go for Messi, because he does things that other players can't, and leave them open-mouthed.
I've got an answer when I get asked that one. Messi, no, start with Ronaldo. Ronaldo, the best striker in the history of the game at a time when it's so difficult to defend. Sorry, it's easier to defend and so difficult to attack. He manages to still find a way in whatever place he's been. Best striker in the world ever, and Messi the best player in the world ever. So I kind of
spot on.
in not sitting on the fence, but helps with the question. Now going back to the book, one of the things that have evolved is the presence and the importance and the relevance of the managers. So managers were and you've gone through that transition yourself, haven't you? Especially having been at Liverpool with that also went through its own transition in terms of what kind of manager they got. That is the one of the big changes in the last 2-3 decades, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about the change in managing the styles of managers?
yeah, how they relate to the team, what's their importance, and what the job is really.
Yeah, it's interesting really because I hear a lot of people, managers even say this now, and players saying how important man management is, and there's no doubt, of course, it's important. But when people say it's the most important thing, I don't necessarily agree. For me, the information from the manager in terms of how we're going to play, how we're going to set up, really for me is more important. I think the great managers have a great balance of all aspects you need to be a manager. I'm sure that what makes Pep and Jurgen Klopp at this moment seen as the two top managers, really. But for me, I want the information, the coaching, the way of working to be that for me is the most important, really, to improve the players, make the team as strong as possible, and make the team as best as possible. Really, I think in the past, I'm not going to knock former managers, but what I mean by that is that I think the job is a lot tougher now, certainly with the media scrutiny, social media. I think even buying players now is maybe taken out the manager's hands, and it's actually, you've got to look around the world. You're looking for players around the world. Whereas I think if you go back to the 60s, the 70s, you think of in England, Bill Shankly, Don Revie, Matt Busby. If you want a player, you're basically looking in the first division. You're looking at possibly the players you played against that season, really. So it's not integrating foreign players. And so I think it's a lot tougher now, bigger squads as well. Really. So I think there's a lot more to management right now than there possibly was done in the past. But I think that's the same with players as well. We ask so much of players now, more than we'd asked of them before. But I think dealing with the media as well, agents as well now, and managing up. I know we talk about recruitment strategies of a club, maybe not in the hands of the manager, owners from abroad, keeping them on side. So I think the job is getting more and more complex. Really, I know managers will say we have to do everything in the past. Now there's things are delegated, and I understand that, but I actually think that's right as well.
Have you retired Jamie Carragher, the manager, before he even started?
Yeah, I think so. I don't. No, I don't envisage myself going into management. I love the job I do. I'm lucky. I think I've got one of the best jobs on TV. But I think management is so precarious. It really is. I actually feel sorry for some managing situations where a job's just, before you know it, it's taken away from them. They haven't had long enough to stamp their authority on it. Really, I think the reaction from the media, social media towards managers is way over the top and out of order. I think at certain stages that we think these fellas are idiots because they have a few bad results, really, when that's not the case at all. Really, most managers, I'll say most, I'd say 99%, have got a great knowledge of the game and understanding of the game. There's always things going on behind the scenes that they can never say publicly within a club. They always come out years later when the books come out, or they speak to Guillem Balague in an interview maybe, or they come on Monday Night Football with me, really. So there's so much more to it. I think me leaving home to go and be a manager, I think it was not something I was prepared to do. I didn't want it enough. I love football, I think, more than Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Wayne Rooney, who have gone into management, who are my peers, if you like, in my group. I would say I was more obsessed with football when we were all players, and they'd admit that. Again, that doesn't mean you can or you can't be a manager, but I also think I would find it frustrating as a manager that people didn't share my passion. So I have a feeling that I would fall out with people, and I would be at times maybe too emotional, really. So I think that might be something maybe against me being a manager in the certainly in the future. And I think results would affect me because they really affected me as a player, really. And I think I used to have some dark times with Liverpool when things weren't going well or I wasn't playing well myself. I had such a big fear of failure. I wanted to win so much that I think that would be, doubly as bad when I was a manager. So I think I would find those situations tough to deal with.
Let me say that if there is any bit in your mind that thinks like, well, maybe I should try, or wasn't I brought into this world to be part of inside the game? Forget it, because you are helping us understand the game better, and that to me is a bigger legacy than winning a game or even 100 games. So from that point of view, again, thank you. We're finishing now, but you looked at the past, and that's the easiest way to understand the future or to understand where we're going. So have you had time to think what next for football in terms of how it's played or how it's going to evolve? We've now gone through high pressure building from the back. There is the suggestion that the goalkeepers will get involved further up the pitch, that now we've seen the fullbacks getting inside. Have you had time to think what next?
I mean, it's something we think and we talk about on Monday Night Football a lot, really. And you just think, can the game become more technical? Really, I'm not. I think there's always ways going forward. I think I saw something even in the lower leagues. I think it was Milton Keynes. I'm sorry, I forgot the manager's name. I think he used to play for Norwich, and his goalkeeper was becoming like a right centre back. So they had no one in goal, and the centre back was going to, and it was like a knock-on effect to give them an extra player further forward. I saw a clip of that. I think we should maybe look at that on Monday Night Football, actually.
Didn't Pep try something like that as well with Ederson in next to the centre backs?
I think that was in the goal kick. That was something I saw Pep do on the goal kicks in the Charity Shield against Liverpool a couple of years ago. It hasn't quite gone into the Premier League as much, where he was actually, there was no goalkeeper. He was standing on the 6-yard box with a centre back, and the other centre back went on the edge of the box, so the midfielders, and then they were creating a number 10 overload between the lines, and Liverpool were a little bit wary to go and press. So it's just, I always say the game goes in cycles, and we'll have a team who win again who play counter-attack or a defensive. I don't think it's that long ago when Leicester won the league. Even Conte's team with Chelsea that won the league was not free-flowing. It was a brilliant team, the three at the back, but it was a solid team. So that wasn't that long ago, and I don't think that we won't ever get a title winner doing that again. I think it'd be very difficult to go fully where we are now, how technical the game is, to go fully back to a really robust game where there's not much football, really. I think supporters now are educated enough and want to actually go and watch a team play good football. I think in the past it was always the results always that matters. And for me, it's always the result is always bigger than the performance. But over time, if the performances aren't there, you'll lose games, you won't win. So I think that's a problem now for maybe managers in the past. You look at Sam Allardyce now, who's come in, and those type of managers, I think they'll find it more and more difficult to get jobs unless that job is all about results, which is West Brom at this moment. But what happens, I think, in those jobs is once they cement themselves in the Premier League, they want the next thing, and those managers maybe can't give them, and that's when they have to sort of move them on, really. So I think the game is that technical now. I think if you're a young coach coming into it and you're not seen as someone who plays good football, who plays from the back, I think you'd find it very difficult to get a top job. I really do. And I think that's something, if you want to get to the top in football, whether to manage your country, manage someone in the Champions League, you've got to be thinking of your own idea, not copy people. But I think you've got to have an element of what the top teams are doing and the top coaches are looking to do.
Last question for you, taking advantage of you mentioning Milton Keynes. I don't know if you know, but I'm the chairman of a football club in this Step 5 in England, Biggleswade United. And this season, the thinking is from most people to null and void the season for the second consecutive year. Null and void, as if what we've done in the last 2 years doesn't count at all. How would you feel if you were a non-league player and they tell you the last 2 seasons count for nothing? How do you think about null and void? What you thinking of that?
No, I don't like it at all. I didn't like it last season. People thought it was just because Liverpool were on the verge of winning the league. I think when you've invested so much into a league season, I think it's very unfair, and I think I don't like that at all. There was definitely talk of that last season, and it was basically every club was looking after themselves, and the people who were coming out saying null and void, the teams who were fighting relegation and were thinking about money, really. And I just never felt those teams should be rewarded for a poor performance. So the reason they want null and void is because they're struggling in the league. They haven't had a great season. They've had to change the manager, and then teams, the division below, who've had great seasons, done everything right, they're getting punished and can't come up because of this null and void situation. So no, I'm certainly not a null and void. I never will be. Even if Manchester United maybe look like they're on the verge of bringing the title back, I I wouldn't be calling for null and void, because I don't think it's fair when so much is being invested on the pitch, off the pitch, emotionally, by coaches and managers up and down the country within football. And that's no matter whatever level you play. It doesn't matter what level you play. We all invest that emotional side into it, and football means so much to us all. Whether you're playing in non-league or you're playing for the Champions League or the Premier League, it's still the same. It's just a different quality of football, but what we invest in it is all the same, whether you're chairman of your club or John Henry at Liverpool.
Yeah, our first team men's and ladies are doing really well, right at the top to be promoted. But under 23s are bottom of the table of their league, and I still feel the same, that null and void will be rewarding mediocrity. Jamie, as always, it's been such a pleasure to have a time with you and to keep learning from you, and just keep being as positive and happy and strong and energetic as you are. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Thank you.